Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to Everything We Love About Disney, the podcast with the description in the name because it's where we talk about everything we love about Disney. I am one of your hosts, Tommy T. Alongside me is my co-host, who just happens to be my lovely wife, Gina.
Hi, everyone.
So thanks for being here with me on yet another episode of our show. So today's topic, we're going to jump right in, is going to be the Great Movie Ride. And I thought this would be a great, sorry, no pun intended, topic for right now because we have its replacement opening just a couple weeks from recording, which is, of course, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, which I've got, mixed feelings about, mostly because I love the Great Movie Ride so much. It's been one of my favorite rides for a long time. And so, Gina, what is your sort of high-level opinion on the Great Movie Ride? Because like I just said, it's one of my favorites. Will always be one of my favorites. But what about for you? Where does it kind of land on your spectrum of Disney attractions?
I would definitely have to say that this was one of our favorites growing up. And certainly in the early days of our family trips, it was a must-do. And just the fact that even though during crowded days or, we would go on vacation weeks that were otherwise crowded, the fact that there could be a lot of people that could experience the ride relatively quickly. It was a fast-loading attraction. It was beautiful. It was enormous. I think it harkens back to a lot of the former Epcot rides where there were lots of gigantic screens that back in those days you really wouldn't be able to see otherwise in the public or certainly in a movie theater. So it was a very exciting experience. And I just love this ride because it really did inspire me to want to get to know the canon of American film because I really didn't know much about it as a kid. You watch movies with your parents, but to understand the history and the importance of all of these films all in one place, it was just really fantastic, and especially in keeping with the Hollywood Studios MGM theme, which MGM will always be the name of Hollywood Studios for me.
Yeah, you touch on so many points just now that I want to unpack a little bit.
Right.
Because all of those are really key aspects, or you brought up so many key aspects of what makes this ride special. One I want to start with, very high level technical thing, is the people eater function of it.
Yes.
I think it was among, if not the most, the highest capacity attraction in Disney World for a long time, maybe ever. And that's one of the biggest things that we lost when it closed.
Right. I feel like we need those more than ever now.
Yeah, and for these past couple of years without it, it's been especially before Galaxy's Edge opened, you went to that park and you were like, all right, well, we can go on Coaster and Tower, and then it's everything else is a show or a really, difficult experience to get into. And yeah, it served this function where you just did it because you could, because the wait was 20 minutes.
Right.
And the ride was 25 minutes. And so it felt like you got your quote-unquote money's worth, and it was just such a great thing because you got a show and a ride and a history lesson all in one, to tie into what you were just saying about how it really was a history lesson for classic Hollywood. And yeah, that was the theme of the park, was, hey, we're going to take you into the movies and we're going to show you how they're made, we're going to show you the history, we're going to show you all the technical behind the scenes. And this was the centerpiece of that from the opening day of Disney-MGM Studios.
So as you can imagine, when this ride was announced to be closed, we were very upset. And it was the same time, it was August 2017 that it closed.
Yeah.
So a very abrupt announcement. So unfortunately, we did not get a chance to make a last trip down. It was the same day as Ellen's Energy Adventure closure, which, as you may or may not know, was also one of my favorite attractions. So that was a sad day in Disney history for us.
That will be a future episode, I think.
Yes.
Will be Ellen's.
Yep.
Kind of similar attractions in many ways. The ride vehicles were similar. The animatronics,
the flow,
the feel, of the overall ride was very similar. And yeah, they gave us about 6 weeks notice, and it just wasn't enough time for us to really make it work. Maybe even less. It was pretty quick turnaround. But okay, enough for a minute about the closing of the attraction. Let's talk about the inception of it for a second. So for those that don't know, The Great Movie Ride was actually spawned from an idea for an Epcot pavilion. I don't know if you know this, Gina.
I did not know that.
But it was a proposed pavilion alongside the other Future World things to say, what if, cinema was a pavilion? And that combined with the fact that, Universal is playing their own, like, Hollywood-themed theme park down the street, it was kind of like, hey, look, this shouldn't just be one ride. This should be a whole theme park. And so it became the centerpiece ride for, obviously, Disney-MGM Studios, and all spawned from what would have been an Epcot ride. And I just wrote down here that, again, to me, it defined the theme of the park, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Classic Hollywood going into the classic movie stars and some of the best movies throughout the decades up until that point, 1989, when it opened.
And it's literally the focal point of the park. So in the time that it was closed, the park felt very unsettlingly not only empty, but just it didn't have that purpose that it once had. It was very disjointed and maybe still is to a degree.
It was like your gateway into the rest of the park, and to not have it there was like you had to go pretty deep into the park to find a ride.
Right.
So I am glad that this building will house a ride again.
Right.
What's so cool about the way it was built was that you have the replica of the Chinese theater.
Yeah.
Actually, let's talk about that for a second first, how faithful of a replication it is, because it is really impressive. I mean, it's still there, fortunately. The facade is still there. And I actually lived right down the block from the real Chinese theater in Hollywood for a couple of years. And I went to that building, walked by it or was around it just about every day for 2 years. So I got a lot of time spent. I used to go see movies there, and I would walk down when they were having premieres there. Obviously, it's where they have a lot of the big Hollywood premieres still to this day. And so going back to the Disney World one, I was like, oh my God, this is like it. You could not tell the difference. If I transported you between the two and I asked you, okay, which one is this? You wouldn't know. It is 100% perfect.
Wow.
And then, you're kind of expecting that the theater, you're going to some theater show, but the fact that you have this massive ride behind this theater facade was super cool as well. So from there, I mean, I kind of just want to go through the experience, I guess, of riding and use that. I guess one more note that I made about the architecture of the facade. So it opened in 1927. And this was considered an exotic revival style. I guess they were going back to like ancient cultures, like the Egyptian theater was the first one that Sid Grauman built, and then he built the Chinese theater, going back to taking these ancient architecture and design motifs and then updating them for modern era. So pretty interesting. And then out front, of course, you have also replicated the footprints and handprints of movie stars, and Disney got their own batch of movie stars. I don't know, did you guys like to go and look at those when you went to the park?
Oh yeah, it'd be so fun. And I can imagine that those were the people who made it to the premiere of the park, or... They did
a bunch of them then, but then whenever they could get somebody through that was famous, I just wrote down a handful of names. I mean, these are just some of them, and most, if not all, these are still there, but I think they change out some from time to time, or
really?
Or whatever. I'm not certain on this. I should have done more research on that, but I was able to find that there is Charlton Heston, Audrey Hepburn, Angela Lansbury, Michael J. Fox, Bob Hope, Dick Van Dyke, Warren Beatty, Jerry Lewis, Jim Henson, Dustin Hoffman, Danny DeVito. Like there's more that I wrote down, but these are big real movie stars.
Right.
These aren't like here's like a I mean, they do have Mickey, Minnie, Donald, and Goofy, and
as you do,
C-3PO and R2-D2 and stuff like that. But they got some big names to really bring the recreation together, where it's fully from the footprints on your very accurate recreation. Same thing goes with the lobby, actually. Even that first lobby you walk into while you're waiting in line is just like the real lobby there.
Really?
Yeah.
So if you recall, you would enter on the right-hand side of the building, and there would be kind of like a... it was sheltered. It was still outside, but it was sheltered, and then you would enter the building, and it was just tall ceilings, in keeping with the Chinese architecture and light fixtures, and there were even some porcelain urns on the ground. And what I loved was that they would have cases of costumes and artifacts from movies, like actual things that they used in the movies, props and things.
I remember they had one of the horses from Mary Poppins.
Yep.
From the carousel there, I think they had the ruby slippers at some point.
Yeah.
At least one of them.
And then in later days, they would include any films that
More
recent.
Disney,
was producing, such as.
I think they had Narnia stuff.
I was going to say Narnia. Yeah. I almost forgot the name of that whole series, but for anyone who cared about that was kind of interesting.
For a couple of years, they were like, let's put a bunch of Narnia stuff in the studios, and I think they really thought that could have been like a thing for them. And then they were like testing and stuff. Let's see if people react to this like Narnia walkthrough attraction, and they put some props around and see if people catch on, like grab onto it, and they
Not
didn't.
so much.
They didn't. So yeah, absolutely. Like that was a great kind of cue to walk through. And then if you had Fast Pass, you would actually go through the front doors. I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, remember the front doors were I mean, I'm sure that's still gonna be the same for
I guess
for
I
Mickey and
forgot
Minnie's.
that. It was such a fast loader that we never
That's true.
thought
You
to
didn't
get them
right
until the end when you had the different tiered systems.
Yeah, where you just kind of did. Yeah. So then from the lobby, you'd be ushered into the quote unquote theater, which was the main part of the queue that you probably spent a lot of time weaving
back and forth with the
very
golds.
very tight weaves with the velvet ropes and the gold poles there, the gold stanchions. And then on the big screen in front of you was playing trailers for the films that were portrayed in the ride itself.
Which I loved.
Yeah, which was great because it gave you sort of some context for the. So like even if you hadn't seen the movie, maybe you'd heard of it but didn't know what it looked like or what it was about. Maybe you'd seen it a long time ago, whatever. So it really was a preview. It was a trailer. So then you would walk out of the theater in the front, so you weave all the way up to the screen essentially, and then in the front right of that room, you would walk into the boarding area, which was a recreation of a Hollywood soundstage, which was super cool.
Yes.
You would have this backdrop that was like the Hollywood Hills.
Which I loved. It was all cutouts. It was just beautiful, and they had the fiber optic lights to make it look like...
Yep. Like it was nighttime, like all the lights were on. Yep. And my understanding is, we're recording this on February 23rd. We're just getting to cast member previews for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, and my understanding is that a lot of this has been maintained, at least the fact that you're in the lobby is the same.
Yeah, the bones look the same.
And you do board in the same kind of area and the same kind of layout, so a lot of this should still be there, so that's fun.
Which is exciting.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, honestly. Why would you want to change something so drastically that it could
fit so well,
and you could probably save a little bit of money knowing that the system was already in place.
Yep. So from here you would board your ride vehicle. The system here was similar to what we saw at again Ellen's Energy Adventure, as well as what is used when you exit the elevator shaft in Tower of Terror, where it is technically trackless, but you have this tiny little guide rail that sort of guides the vehicle, but it moves very seamlessly and smoothly.
And you could fit a lot of people into these vehicles.
Yeah, I was able to find out how many, but
just lots, row upon row.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was like 24 rows probably of 10 people each.
Right.
And if they had two vehicles going, I mean, they're boarding upwards of 500 people at a time every few minutes. Right. So that's why I was able to just push people through at a really high clip. I don't know. That seems high. Maybe I'm wrong. but even if it was a few hundred, right? Even if it's 200 or 300, that's a lot to be boarding every few minutes. And like I just said, at busier times, there'd be two sets of ride vehicles boarding at once. A lot of the time, it was just the one ride vehicle. And it was sort of, again, this is kind of similar to what it's going to look like on Mickey and Minnie. So if you never got to go on a Great Movie Ride, if you're kind of forgetting, it's going to look similar. But I don't know, how would you describe them? They're just these long, flat vehicles. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyone who went on, like we said, Ellen's Energy Adventure, very similar ride vehicles. And I loved the focal point of that room outside of the Hollywood Hills mural, which was the marquee, which had the pink and yellow lighting, and it just had the Great Movie Ride sign, and that was your
so you're going
entrance into the ride.
Right, so it's like you're literally driving into a movie.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like you're driving into a movie theater, right? So your tour guide, who is dressed in a very like 30s style, Hollywood 20s, 30s style, with the cap and the suspenders and the white shirt and stuff, and this dark red motif running throughout the ride. He or she would jump into your vehicle and grab the microphone and kind of introduce himself, and you were off into the movies. So it was this kind of ride where you have a guide that is narrating the experience.
I will say, towards the end of the ride's lifetime, TCM, Turner Classic Movies, was a sponsor, and so the narration of the original ride changed ever so slightly. I forget the name
ever
of
so
the guy.
strangely. So you had Robert Osborne,
right,
who is the host on like TCM's programming, where they do like I don't know what you want to call it, like these video packages along with movies. So like he would introduce the movie and give you like background and history and stuff about said movie, interspersed with the film itself.
So just to make things clear, we are doing the pre-TCM narration because that was the version we grew up with, that we liked the most.
It was one that existed for over 25 years. Before,
exactly. So suffice to say, we don't really care for the for the TCM version.
Right,
so let's keep going.
Yep. So the first room was musicals, which of course was one of the first big booms in Hollywood from the 20s, basically through the 50s and early 60s. It was one of the biggest.
Right, that was the taste back then.
Genre of film,
Big dance numbers, singing.
Yep, so it started with Busby Berkeley's musical extravaganza, Footlight Parade, which was this very early musical, 1933. So, talkies were only a few years old at this point. And that was one of the reasons why I think they got so big, too, was that you had 20 years of silent film, and all of a sudden you could talk, and it's like, okay, musical, let's do
Incredible.
it. So this was this Art Deco kind of musical extravaganza again. Then, so that was on the right side, where you had the scene of the water dancers kind of spinning in this, almost like a cake.
Yeah, different tiers.
Like a multi-layer cake, yeah. And then to your left, you would kind of turn your head. You literally turn, but you're sort of coming around to turn. You would see Gene Kelly from Singing in the Rain, his iconic scene. And then the other thing is that, especially through these early scenes, is that your guy would give you little trivia tidbits here and there, like the fact that they put milk into the rain on the Singing in the Rain scene so it would show up better on camera, little things like that.
Or he had a fever of 103, I guess, when he filmed that scene, which, what incredible stamina for him to do that.
And I love that. Go watch that sequence on YouTube. It's one of like the best musical sequences ever. And then you would wrap up this room with a little scene from Mary Poppins with Dick Van Dyke and Julie Andrews, of course, in their iconic roles. So you kind of like go under them. They're up on the rooftops doing their Chim Chim Tree deal, and then you would go under them, and then this is the first of many like transitions that are super fun as you go. It's really well done because you went from this lively musicals, and then that Chim Chim Tree, like Dark London, has this darker city vibe.
It does,
and it goes very nicely into Crime Alley, the Gangster Alley. So now you're all of a sudden in a 20s or 30s gangster movie, and this could be more like themed to any sort of gangster movie from that era. And you would see an animatronic of James Cagney from The Public Enemy.
Sketchy alleyways.
Yep.
Old posters on the walls.
Right,
brick.
like torn, and you got like I guess it's supposed to be more Chicago because you have the L above you. Though I guess that could be New York too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sort of like New York / Chicago, crime alley. So then you pull up to like one of my favorite things in any Disney ride ever is this whole aspect of the rides. Now you pull up, and there's these lights that signal whether the vehicle can go through the door to the next room or not. And the light suddenly turns red, and your guide says, "Sorry, folks, don't want to run a red light, even if it is just a movie." And then, I think by the time we were all adults and read this 100 times, like, this wasn't that surprising or, like, amazing. But as a young child going on this ride, when all of a sudden another real human being walks up and sort of starts mouthing off to your guide in his pinstripe gangster suit, it was the coolest thing to me. Like, it is so unexpected to go on it for the first time, and you've got an animatronic of this sort of gangster guy with a Tommy gun, and you've got this real actor who starts sort of saying to your guide, hey, shut your mouth or whatever, and they says, hey, get over here, and your guide's like, what? I'm sorry, and then all of a sudden the actor flashes their pistol and says, I said get over here. Your guy runs over to kind of deal with it, and then you're all of a sudden in the middle of a shootout between as this other car drives up and starts firing rounds basically over your vehicle at the gangsters that you were just sort of in an altercation with. Your guide is out of the vehicle at this point, and you're in a gunfight.
Yeah.
So how does this scene kind of play for you? What are your memories of this moment of the ride?
I remember being scared as a little kid, but as I got older, I grew to appreciate it that much more, and it was definitely a favorite for my parents. Thought it was so cool, and my brother thought it was so cool, and having that live action aspect to it, where other than a show that you just sit down for, this was a really active form of attraction.
Yeah, I can't think. I mean, you have other rides like maybe the Backlot Tour, or I don't know. You have other rides that are interactive and have a live guide, and they're doing things, and things are happening to your vehicle, and they're kind of playing along. But for them to actually leave their vehicle, and then the next thing that happens is they kind of run off scared. So now you have no guide, and the gangster runs into your vehicle and takes control. And then you have this red light there still, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep doing the lines in the ride, but it's my favorite ride, so I'm going to do it. But he says, running a red light's against the law, and I would never break the law. Watch this. And he shoots the red light, and it actually bursts open with a great effect. It like bursts like it was shot. And then you are hijacked by this gangster, and you are driving. So that, to me, like, it just blew my mind. To like, that would never, I just never would have expected that to happen on a ride. So our next scene is the western town we now roll into, and on days where they were running two sets of ride vehicles, if you were in the front car, you did not get that scene. You rolled right through Gangster Alley, and the car behind you got that scene. As you come into the western scene, you get a similar experience there. But first, you see John Wayne on his horse and Clint Eastwood lighting up a cigar in front of, or a cigarette in front of the saloon there. Are you?
And their animatronics looked very good.
Those are some of the best. You're right. Those are really good. Are you a Western person at all? Have you seen many Westerns?
No, but my parents did, so they appreciated it.
I'm not a huge Western person, but I do appreciate these two actors. So in this scene, instead of a car driving up, on the right side you have a sheriff who is after a bandit. And what happens is they say somebody's robbing the bank. Your guide runs into this bank building, and then out of the bank runs this bandit, and behind them they throw a stick of dynamite or a bundle of dynamite into the bank, which then explodes. So the implication here is that your guy just blew up in this bank, which is pretty, intense for a Disney ride. And then similarly, the bandit will take over your vehicle, just like the gangster would have in the previous scene. And then if you had been taken over by the gangster in the previous scene, you just kind of see a little mini shootout as you roll through this area.
If I could interject, though, this scene, what was part of the fun of this experience of the Great Movie Ride is you didn't know which room we were going to get. So if you got the gangster room scene with the live action, that was exciting. But if you got this room, it was also exciting because just the fireball and the heat and the brightness that came from the literal fire that came out of this building. I mean, I would love to know how many times they set this set ablaze.
I know, right?
It was very contained, of course, very Disney, very safe. but it was just so incredible to experience that close, this giant fireball in this scene. It was just amazing.
Yeah. Funny little trivia fact for you. When it first opened, only men were gangsters and only women were bandits. Isn't that funny?
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure what that was, but they changed that eventually. But, yeah, that's the way it was. And yeah, you always did feel a little bit lucky to get the bandit scene because the gangster was kind of the default. Right. So it was fun. So next we roll into Alien. And this is the scariest probably part of any Disney ride. This ride scared the crap out of me as a kid.
Yeah. And the bandit, too. They're kind of narrating, but then there's a narrator that takes over. Right. There's like a loudspeaker voice. A male voice that you hear, and they're explaining the movie, and the bandit is following along, experiencing it with you.
Yep.
I will admit, as a kid, this scene definitely scared me the most.
Me too. I know a lot of people got really freaked out by this scene. You're essentially dropped in at the last moments of the film Alien when the ship is about to explode and the alien is lurking around the ship after killing the entire crew. So you have this amazing alien animatronic that pops up a couple times, including on the ceiling, from the ceiling above you.
Yeah.
And
that was the scariest.
Yeah, it was really scary.
And there were times where that alien wasn't working. And I would literally be relieved that it wasn't, because there'd be one on your right-hand side, there'd be one at the top, coming down, and there would be smoke, too, to add to the effect.
The smoke and the alarm sound were really scary.
That alarm sound is in my memory, etched in my memory forever.
Well, we should watch that movie because it's right from the movie.
I've seen the movie a long time ago.
We should watch it again.
I think I literally watched it on VHS the last time.
All right, well, we're due.
So we're due, yeah.
So, of course, there's also an animatronic of Sigourney Weaver there. Probably not as strong as some of the others, but still pretty good.
Pretty good.
Next scene up, and we're going to try to blaze through the second half of this a little quicker, but the next scene is from Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. We see Indy and Sala kind of bobbling the Ark itself, which is a fun little scene. It's pretty short. My one little trivia fact there is that in the movie, there are two hieroglyphics that are, or one, I should say, that shows C-3PO and R2-D2.
Oh.
And in this one, in the Great Movie Ride, there was a Mickey and Minnie. Or Mickey and Donald, actually.
I think I remember looking for them.
Towards the left.
Yeah.
Yep. And then we're going to get on to the tomb here, which is a nice transition from the sort of the Ark's tomb into an Egyptian tomb. And this is my favorite scene of the whole thing because it's where it brings everything together. So, like, at this point for the last few scenes, you've been hijacked by a gangster or a bandit, and now they see this precious jewel and they're gonna go get it, basically, because they're playing into their whole personality, being a criminal who's gonna do whatever they can for the big score. But the voice you were just talking about warns us that the jewel is guarded by a curse, and will basically be the end of anybody that touches it. They run up to the top of this pedestal thing, and there's this red shiny jewel. They're about to go grab it and this might have been lost on some people later on. But what you're supposed to think is that there's an animatronic next to it.
Yeah. That's
saying, halt, don't do this, you're going to, or else you will meet your doom, basically. And, it's moving very robotically. You're not supposed to realize that it's a real person. The gangster or bandit grabs the jewel, smoke pours out everywhere, and then when the smoke clears, they have turned into a skeleton. And the animatronic was not an animatronic, but it was your original guide from the beginning of the ride. So how did this scene kind of play for you? Did you I don't know.
When I first saw it, I thought it was incredible, and it's still very impressive. But after experiencing it several dozens of times, I finally figured out how the trick worked, and I was equally impressed.
The effects are super fun. To me, what's so just memorable is that it's just such a well-constructed narrative, right? Of getting hijacked and then getting sort of rescued. But, it just... You're in a movie. It's just anything can happen when you're in the movie. So, and that really plays up that angle.
Right.
So, again, we'll try to get through the rest of these a little quicker. We go past some mummies and skeletons, which is a nod to horror movies, as we then head into not the smoothest transition into the jungle. Well, that's not the worst. where we see Tarzan with Johnny Weissmuller from those Tarzan films of the 50s, I guess.
Sure.
This is probably the least aged the worst, probably, just because those films I feel like got dated.
Yeah.
Not long after the ride opened versus some of the other movies which are more timeless. The next scene up is we go by the last scene from Casablanca with Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman saying their last goodbye there in front of the plane, which was a nod to all the great romance movies from throughout the decades.
And fun fact, which you told me.
Yes. I don't know what you're going to say.
The front half of that plane is in the Great Movie Ride, and the back half of that plane, because this is like a full-size plane with a propeller on the front. Mm-hmm. The second half of that plane, isn't it in
Jungle Cruise?
Jungle Cruise.
That's what's always been said, and this is one of those things that some people swear, like, oh no, 100% it's true. Other people say, oh no, that's a myth.
Disney legends. Folklore.
I'm going to choose to believe it. Take it with a grain of salt, but that's what I've always
you
read.
might as well repurpose something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So next, of course, we needed at least one Disney movie in here with a little Fantasia moment.
And I love this room because it's shaped very differently from the other rooms. It almost feels like an elbow. Like it was almost like an amphitheater, round, half moon, rounded.
It's supposed to be round, and I'll tell you why. Originally, it wasn't going to be Fantasia. It was going to be the tornado of Wizard of Oz.
Oh.
It was going to be that you got swept up by the tornado and sent you to Oz.
Wow.
And I'm not sure exactly why. Did I write down here? No, I'm not sure why that was scrapped. Maybe they just wanted a Disney movie in there. Maybe they just weren't getting the effects right. I'm sure you might be able to find out if you dig into it a little deeper. But yeah, that's why it was designed to be the tornado.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's really the only room after the ending montage that has screen playing the film.
Yeah, because obviously it's animated.
Right.
Though it would have been cool to have a Mickey animatronic.
Yeah.
But again, I think the nature of it being a sort of last minute change just was like, okay, we'll just project Sorcerer's Apprentice onto the wall.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is Sorcerer's Apprentice scene from Fantasia. And then you move into what's probably the most impressive room, which is you are in Munchkinland from Wizard of Oz.
The detail in this room was incredible.
The scale.
The scale. And in thinking about maybe where all these materials went.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that they're repurposing them somehow, or they've put them in archives, or they've done something, because, I mean, how many Munchkins were there in that room?
Yeah, there's probably
dozens.
A couple dozen Munchkins. I mean, the scale of this room is probably only rivaled by maybe the burning town and pirates, or the ships and a couple pirate scenes, and now Rise of the Resistance.
Right.
Nothing else really meets this level of like just being this giant room filled with detail and animatronics and just really well designed elements.
And speaking of giant room, back when this was still available, if you could go on the Disney meetings and events website and you could actually book the Wizard of Oz room in the Great Movie Ride for any kind of party. And I'm not sure how many it could hold.
I'm not sure.
Obviously, a standing cocktail reception could hold a lot more people than a seated dinner, but literally the old website, you could see pictures of tables set in this room. And I'm sure it was at like a 10 p.m. time because you had to wait till everyone... Yeah, you couldn't do it in public hours, but remember at one point, Tommy and I looked at it just out of curiosity.
Well, I wanted to do Gangster Alley. You could you could do that. That was there too. You could see. I mean, you could probably still dig up these photos of like Gangster Alley with all reception tables set up, which is pretty awesome.
So before we were even engaged, we were kind of half joking about having that as our Disney wedding.
Before I even met you, I was thinking that.
But then we decided to have a Disney wedding after all. We just, unfortunately, couldn't have it in there.
Yep, because they closed it. But... So yeah, you get one last little interaction story beat here with your guide and you kind of taking the place of Dorothy, where she accuses you of dropping a house on her sister's head, just like she does with Dorothy. And when you think about it, that was all written and done when you went through the tornado. Mm-hmm. It makes a lot more sense because you're like, why are they blaming us? We just walked in here. But when you're supposed to be the one that was with the house in the tornado, it makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
And, they kind of just recreate the exact dialogue from Wizard of Oz with a very impressive Wicked Witch animatronic.
Yeah, the fact that they timed it so well that the cast member could talk back to the witch and she would respond. It was just very well done.
Sorry, how close she was to you.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Usually they kind of hide animatronics further away so that, you wouldn't kind of notice some of the strange movements.
Right, but her movement was very lifelike.
I mean, that's 30 years ago, and that was really impressive.
Yeah.
And then on your way out, you saw, Dorothy and the others, of course, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion, and Toto, of course, on their way to Emerald City. So, of course, wouldn't be...
Which was another beautiful scene with the fiber optic green.
Yep.
And then the pillars of Emerald City from the movie in the background.
Again, completing the theme here has been that they perfectly recreated so many things from so many films and real life stuff, and this was no exception. So for the grand finale here, your guide kind of tells you that these are just a few of the great movies there are, but there's a ton more out there to discover or something like that. And then she says, here are just a few of my favorites. And you watch this wonderful montage of kind of takes you through the history of Hollywood again, through different genres, sort of as kind of how it was divided up. You went from silent films to, again, the musicals, action, comedy, sci-fi, like romance, the whole romance section. So, and basically it's just it's a pretty complete list of the most famous movies of all time.
And I loved it because even though I didn't know all of the titles of the films, I could pick out some that I had seen and looked forward to the moment I could come home and maybe check a few more off the list until the next time I went to go on the ride.
I still have my running list of which ones I've seen and I cross off every once in a while. And then it's always fun because I know the montage so well after writing it so many times. It's always fun to watch one of those movies for the first time and to get to that scene and give myself a little fist pump because I'm like, yep, there it is. Like the scene that I've watched so many times out of context, here it is in context.
And the montage changed a few times over the course of the attraction's history, but certainly the ones that we liked the most were from the earlier days up until like the early 2000s. Yeah,
it did. With that TCM change that you were talking about earlier, it did get a major overhaul-ish. So it was the same kind of ideas and style, but they just added some more stuff, took some stuff out, and it kind of just felt like a
It wasn't shift. A better version.
It wasn't better. It was just different.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad either. It was just different. And then you would wind up back on the soundstage where you began with one last round of applause for your guide. So that is the Great Movie Ride, and I think we covered most of the things that we love about it.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any closing thoughts from you as far as like the experience itself and what you love about it, or what you're gonna miss about it, or anything like that?
Well, I definitely miss the sounds, and I miss the music, and all I can think of is "Hooray for Hollywood."
Of course, that was the main theme in the beginning and end of the ride.
So much fun. Mm-hmm. Just a great. I miss it, and I'm hopeful for the Mickey and Minnie Runaway Railway. It'll be really nice to be inside that building again.
Yes.
If not for nostalgic reasons, and it's just one of those attractions that we will never forget.
Yeah. I concur on all fronts. So just a couple of closing little trivia tidbits. This is the Diz Quiz channel, after all. A few different times they really wanted to bring this over to Disneyland in some ways.
Wow.
Of course, it would fit in nicely in the Hollywoodland section.
Absolutely.
Of Disney California Adventure. I'm sure it was very expensive to put together in the first place.
Right, because it was enormous, too, which I'm sure scale was an issue.
Yeah, to rebuild all those animatronics and the ride system and stuff. When they first built the park, I'm sure that it was much easier to get the budget for something like that. When you're adding it to an existing park, not so much, apparently. And the other interesting thing that almost happened was when they were really gunning for the Muppet Land at Disney Hollywood Studios, or Disney-MGM Studios in the very early days. There was an idea for the Great Muppet Movie Ride.
Oh my goodness.
Which was basically going to be a similar ride, except it was the Muppets recreating some of their favorite Hollywood classics.
I would have loved
I know. There were a lot of great Muppet ride proposals that all kind of went away when Jim Henson passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would have been something.
Of course, it wouldn't probably have the same... Well, I shouldn't even say that.
I don't know.
I'm glad the Great Movie Ride existed as it did.
Well, it would have been a second ride.
Oh,
this would have been
interesting.
So you go on the Great Movie Ride, and then you'd see the Great Muppet Movie Ride.
Oh, that would be even better.
Right. So it'd almost be a parody of the ride that was on the other side of the park.
Wow.
So, but I think they might have. I don't know. I'm sure they probably proposed doing a redo. Basically, most rides you could think of. I shouldn't say most rides, but there's a lot of Disney rides that. There have been proposals throughout the years of what if we just did a Muppet overlay of this and just like, for instance, American Adventure. There was an idea, I think, for the Disney's America theme park.
Oh, wow.
Where it was like, what if we did kind of the American Adventure, but as told by Sam Eagle and the Muppets.
Oh, wow.
So maybe someday we'll finally get a new Muppet attraction.
I am always down for a new Muppet attraction.
Watch the Muppets, people. Go to Disney Plus. If you're going out for the day, queue up all the Muppet movies and just let them play. So that Disney knows that we love the Muppets, and they see those numbers going up because we need more Muppets in our lives.
We do.
Now more than ever, we need the world needs the Muppets. So I think that'll just about wrap it up. I'm trying to think if I have any closing thoughts, but yeah, I mean, if you've listened this far, you obviously know how much I love this ride. So I don't think I need to iterate that another time. But I'm glad we got it. I'm glad we had it for almost 30 years. But I'll continue to miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Optimistic about the future, but nostalgic for the past.
Yep.
So that will wrap it up. Gina, where can people find you on the internets if they want to follow along?
So I have a blog, willrunfordisney.com. You can also find me on Instagram at willrunfordisneyblog, Twitter, and Facebook.
Yep, and of course follow the Diz Quiz at the Diz Quiz on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And check us out on YouTube or podcast services of your choice. If there's one that we're not on yet that you'd like to listen to us on, let me know. We're on Spotify now for this feed and a bunch of others. So you should be able to find it without too much difficulty. And, the listenership for this particular show has been going up and it's been doing quite well. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really awesome. That's why we're continuing to do it at least monthly was our goal right now, monthly podcast. Yeah. But hey, if you listen more, if you want more, we can try to do some more.
Yeah, let us know.
We're busy lives, but we do enjoy doing the show. And then if there's a topic, it's everything we love about Disney, but you're part of that we. It's everything we as a collective love about Disney. Yeah. So if there's a topic that maybe we've mentioned or that you might want us to talk about, hey, feel free to hit us up, thedizquiz@gmail.com, or leave a comment on wherever you're listening. So until next time, I've been Tommy.
And I'm Gina.
And we will see you real soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.